Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Community Connections this morning. We're thankful that you came. This morning, we have Senator Stan Klaus here to speak to us. From Kearney Public Schools, we have Dr. Jason Lundorf, and from the city, we have Alex Stratman. And then sitting in for Tim Higgins today, we have Dan Lynch sitting in for Buffalo County. So thank you for coming. And again, this is sponsored by Northwestern Energy. Are we decided on who's going to go first this morning? Man, you took the short
The new
straw.
guy? You doing the new guy thing?
That's what you get.
Sure, I'll go first.
All right.
Just give you, going over the last two board meetings, a lot of our stuff of late has been involving some construction up at Ravenna. They're putting in a pickleball court, or trying to put in a pickleball court. The lake belongs to the county, and they do the amenities around it, including a really nice little camping area and stuff like that. And we managed to secure a private donation because we were short about $60,000. And so we had a private donation, and we should be able to proceed with that particular project. And I hope it works well. It's a nice little campground. So says my brother. I've never been up there camping. I no longer camp. I got rid of all my kids, so I don't have to do that anymore. We also had an approval of the TUR's resolution supporting implementation of a local retail food establishment inspection program. Most people would assume, as I always have, that the state of Nebraska would provide inspections on hot food preparations and things like that. And they do have that control. They just don't have the people to do it. And as such, they've asked others to do it, including the health department, which I believe they will pick it up and they will begin to do it, which I think is important. I don't know how many of us in the room work food industry at some point in time, and I'm pretty sure all of our cleanliness practices work what they should have been most of the time. That's what they're trying to protect people from when they're doing these kind of things. Let's see, that was on the 28th. We did an update on our 610 building. You may not know, I'm sure Tim probably has mentioned it. We have a 310 building and a 610 building. 310 building is where we moved the driver's license examiner to when we ran out of space in the courthouse. And so that building was renovated, and they're down there now. 610 is where we moved probation and parole because we ran out of room, and they expanded bigger than what we had for them. So we got the old gas building down there, and we're renovating that for more space for them. That project is ongoing, and it seems to last forever. Let's see, last meeting, last Tuesday, we recognized Emergency Services and Police Week. We're working through some questions about our employee health benefits, which is a project of a couple of the other members on the board, trying to get the best prices that we can. We approved a subdivision application, and we did buy some equipment, and most people don't realize this. I believe, I might get this number wrong, but I don't think I am, the county has about 26 road graders, and they're not inexpensive pieces of equipment. We agreed to make a purchase of a John Deere tractor, which was over $100,000, as well as a skip loader that was also over $100,000. Those are always big ticket items, and the road superintendent comes to us for permission to do that. And we had a presentation by Sharon Huffman from South Central Economic Development after that. Other than that, that's kind of what we've been doing. I don't know if I followed Tim's pattern or whatever.
Might be better.
I don't need any more jobs, man. I got a lot of
Did at one time the townships themselves used to supply the graders?
At one time, road maintenance was the responsibility of the townships. And then the townships went away. Therefore, they became the county's responsibility. Because quite frankly, some of them could do it, and some of them couldn't. A lot of them were using their own equipment when we were on a township basis. And a lot of times they were using it for what it was supposed to be used for, farming. So yeah, it used to be that way. It's been a long time since it's been that way. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? Was that good or that bad? Well, I'm just telling you right now, Tim will be back, I'm pretty sure. Cal will, have to take a break sometime. Thank you.
Chief, as we observed, National Police Week, thank you.
Yes.
And we had 3 new officers sworn in last week at last night's meeting, Officer Gold, Officer Wazorek, and Officer Goldbreak. Good break. And so it's always nice to be a part of that ceremony. Last night we had 10 public hearings. 2 weeks ago we had 17 public hearings. So don't let people tell you things aren't happening in Kearney. Last night we use words in a lot anymore, but last night was really historic for Kearney, for the Good Light District. 73% I think was the voter passage for it, and I give a lot of credit to Trevor and Amanda here at the Development Council, and to Brenda and Jonathan for their work. Trevor spoke to Sertoma on Monday, and I think it was his 28th presentation on the Good Life. So we're excited to move that forward. We appreciate people willing to support that initiative. We have the Chicago flights have resumed. April 30th was our first Chicago flight, so we're about 2 weeks in. Our employment numbers are actually up over last year. Last year we had 26,000 employments, and we hovered right around 86 to 87%. Now we're at about 90 to 91% on our employments. So people are taking advantage of flying in and out of Kearney. We're excited to see what those numbers look like. We now have a year's worth of data with SkyWest being back as the provider for Kearney, so being able to compare the numbers to SkyWest from a year ago is really helpful to see if we're trending upward. Before, when it was Denver Air Connect, it was really kind of an apples to oranges comparison, but we went from 44 to 48% employment now to about 87, 88% a year. So we're excited about the numbers. People are taking advantage of Kearney. The numbers from crane season look really good as far as people coming into Kearney. Our sales tax numbers are up. We're actually about $100,000 over where we thought our budget projections would be. So we're excited about that. We have some development projects that have been a little tough on the council. We had one that we had to vote no on a couple of weeks ago, and we have another one that's coming up in a couple of weeks with some high density residential that I think has got some interest in it up on a lot behind the Hilltop Mall. So we're waiting to get a planning commission packet from that, and I'll take a look at that. But really, it's hard to say that, it's a well-oiled machine, but things are really going well at the city level. I really don't have anything negative to say. I mean, things are going well. We're in a good place. We've hit 2 years now with Brenda as the city manager. And I think that things are just really, really moving well. I think the Good Life vote was not just a vote for the Good Life district, but in confidence that the city's moving in the right direction. I think people see what's happening down here. I think people see what Mr. Eunice is doing. And also to have confidence that we're going to continue to develop the rest of the city and put the time, effort, and energy into making Kearney as a whole successful and continue our commitment to the business community. Other than that, that's really about it. I think between the development and the Good Life District, those are the big highlights. So I'm happy to take any questions, but those are really the things that we've been working on and been taking our attention to the city. Yes, sir.
Have you had any challenges with canceled flights?
No, sir.
No.
No, that's a good question. I had the numbers in front of me, but they're actually better than they were a year ago. We have, and the number one request that we had a year ago was we want those Chicago flights. flights back. And I have not heard any criticism of air travel out of Kearney. I think that SkyWest has been working to try and keep the costs down. Certainly with the, Bob, as you know, when you're on the council, you had to work through this with the guaranteed max for them. I think it's going to keep the Chicago price low until we renegotiate in 18 months. But for 18 months, this is going to be our schedule. We're going to have 2 flights to Denver, and we'll have the flight to Chicago. And then when we renegotiate in December of next year with SkyWest, we'll see what it looks like. I think our hope is to negotiate for 1 flight to Denver and 1 flight to Chicago, and then we would do the guaranteed for the second Denver flight. But that's going to be dependent on people using the flight and seeing what the employment looks like. When SkyWest came back to us with the flights, we really wanted to protect those Denver flights because they are so full. We didn't want to adjust the flight times because people, and to the mayor's credit, he pulled the numbers and we looked at the top 40 destinations from Kearney and when people were matching up to the flights. And we didn't want to disrupt that. Number 1 destination out of Kearney is Phoenix, which Bob, I'm sure is a surprise to you. But number 4 is also just Denver itself. We have a lot of people that go to Denver for conferences, conventions, or just a weekend. And so we'll pull those same numbers when when we get to a year on Chicago and see what that looks like. But I think we're really poised really well for a community our size and for serving central and western Nebraska to have both flights going. And they've been dependable. They've been much more dependable than we have with the primary carrier. So to your point, I think that's really one of the things we've been keeping an eye on.
Thank you.
All right.
Kearney Public Schools, we are in an exciting time here getting towards the end of the school year. Lots of different programs. We had several music concerts last week. Our girls soccer team is playing in the state semifinals on Friday at Morrison Stadium in Omaha, if you're interested in that game. The track teams are both competing in districts and state track meets around the corner. I think both teams have a real shot at a state championship. So track is going incredibly well. It always does here in Kearney. And the school board side, the meeting on Monday night, I didn't even need notes because that was one of our shortest meetings we've had. We don't always have those, but we had 3 student recognitions. So we had Hudson Delabote, who was recognized as an FFA state officer. That's the first state officer Kearney has had since 1959. But ironically, Kearney also has had 12 different state officers because between 1920 something and 1959, there was a lot of state officers from Kearney. We were pretty prominent in FFA. So that program got reignited when Mr. Stratton was on the board a little before I came to Kearney, but the teachers have done a great job. And they have 94 members in the chapter. It's one of the biggest in the state. So they're doing tremendous work. We had Ingrid Bovey is a FCCLA student who qualified for national competition in Washington, D.C. Mrs. Gifford, who's been on our board, she's an FCCLA volunteer as well. She was there with Ingrid. Ingrid competed in a business entrepreneurship contest and qualified as the state champion to go to a national competition. And then we also had another recognition for a student. This one was in HOSA, where the young lady was in nursing skills, and Tessa Busher, and she qualified for a national competition in Atlanta. So exciting for Tessa. She was the one and only winner that would go on from Nebraska. So we had those 3 recognitions. We then moved into a first reading of the 7,000. I'll just step back on that. We have a complete board policy review that we've done this year. So we have a board policy committee that we've gone through every section of our board policies. We last did that in 2017. Alex was on the board. So that's not something you do every year. Every year you get new updates in board policy from the attorneys based on state statutes, changes, things that are going on in the unicameral. But one of the things we had as a challenge in our board policy is that, and this was a great example of it, this series of policies that we had in the 9000s was called the internal bylaws or the working bylaws of the school board. So really, how does the school board function? Well, our attorney has most of those policies in an 8,000 section. So when we would get a revision, let's say for whatever reason, it's our board policy 9220, it's the attorney's policy 8360, we'd have to try to figure out and make sure we were matching up the correct policy in our manual with the correct policy of our attorneys. Well, that's not always efficient or practical. And so by going through, we did a lot of remuneration through this, which really aligned our numbers with our attorney's numbers so that it's a lot easier to make sure we're not missing something when that comes up. So we did that first reading of those policies, and so we'll have a new 8,000 section. There'll still be a few policies in the 9,000s. Then we also reviewed the 7,000 section, which is really a lot of construction policies, things that are related to construction. Kent Cordes was there, gave us an update on school construction. Cottonwood Elementary is coming along. We anticipate by the end of the summer that will be done, and we're kind of tentatively targeting August 1st for an open house. The performance activity wing at Kearney High School, that is ahead of schedule. We think punch out will be early June. We are waiting on some graphics, and then we'll do an open house. We're kind of targeting July 1st, but that could move up because that space will be one that as soon as we get done with an open house, students, athletes, coaches, they're going to want to be in utilizing it. So that's a very, and they'll want to utilize it this summer. So we don't want to set it too early, but make sure we get our graphics up and those sort of things and have it complete, but we might move it up from July 1st. Central Elementary, they're going to do some flooring replacement this summer. There's a little bit of asbestos abatement that needs to be done in that building. It's an older building, that flooring when you get into it. We did already, the addition is complete. We're going to do a ribbon cutting, kind of a celebration for that in conjunction with the 100-year anniversary of the building in September. So that's coming up. Other than that, that was pretty much it for the school board meeting. We did have milk and bread bids. We have that annually. We had two milk. We sent out to 2 vendors for milk, Kemp's Dairy and Highland Dairy. Highland was the only one that submitted a bid. So Highland is our obviously our winner, and it's still good pricing. Same thing in bread. We always chuckle. Two vendors, Pano Gold and Bimbo. I'm always personally cheering for Bimbo bakeries, but they didn't submit a bid. Pano Gold did, so that is our bread bid. Why only so few? I think it's a real challenge logistically right now in transportation at times to have a lot of vendors competing and the school commodity prices and things. I just don't think the margins are there where a lot of people are bidding on it per se. A couple other notes. We had our first military signing day at the high school. Colonel Stratman was part of that, and I appreciate him being there. We recognized 6 students who are going to go on to military commitments. That's pretty notable. It's the second year of the ROTC program. We're very proud of that program. Confident that number will grow, but 6 really great kids that did that. We also had our honors night last night. We had 32 students in the graduating class that had a 30 or higher on the ACT, which is in the top 2% of test takers nationally, which is great. And the class collectively had $6.8 million worth of scholarships. So pretty fantastic work by the counselors and the students, obviously, in their efforts to secure scholarships. So lots of great things, closing up fast. We're starting our preparations and planning for next year. And before we know it, we'll be off and running with another new and different school year. So that's what's happening. Any questions?
I just wanted to put in a plug for your junior ROTC program. I think it was really neat to see, though, you had 6 different students taking different paths in the military. You had 2 that were enlisting that are going to use it to pay for college. You had 1 going to ROTC at South Dakota State, 1 going to ROTC at Creighton, 1 going to the Merchant Marine Academy, and then you had 1 going to the Naval Academy who received appointments at academies and got to choose which service academy she wanted to go to. So I think that's just a tremendous tremendous asset to Kearney to have that program. That's something we worked on for years. And it's nice to see it to fruition, but also for these kids to have the signing day, like the athletes do, was really impressive. And it was just really, really great to see these students taking their pass, but to have not just one, but 2 academy appointments out of Kearney High is a big deal.
Yeah, it is. As you mentioned, yeah, Reese Holscher, she, it's incredible. Every service academy, she had an appointment and chose the Navy, and along with many other scholarships, she had quite an impressive resume. So, yeah, really, really proud of that program. Major Stott, Sergeant Ullman, they do a fantastic job with the kids. The numbers are going up, and they're competing and doing great. So, really, really proud of that. I'd be remiss, I'll turn it over to Senator Klaus. The legislative session as it closed out, since he's here and I'm here, I just publicly like to thank him. Senator Klaus always, during the session, reaches out when there's bills that involve education. He's reaching back to me and other superintendents in the area. Not everyone does that, not every senator. I talk to a lot of superintendents around the state. That's not the type of relationship or inquiry they get from their senators. And so thank you, Senator Klaus, for always looking out for Kearney and public education and what's best for kids, and all kids. So really appreciate you. So I might have questions for you. Yeah.
Dr. Mundorf, has there been much turnover and teacher turnover, and how many are you going to have to replace, or has that been done already?
Yeah, excellent question. This is about a standard year. We have about 440 teachers, and I want to say we're in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 that have resigned or retired. We're somewhere generally, we've had some years up to 50. A lot of years are 25 to 30, 35 when you're into retirement resignations. All positions have been filled outside of a few in special education. We felt that there might be some internal movement with staff to fill a few of those positions. Special education staffing is always the hardest because new kids move in, needs change in the IEP, so the amount of service time a student would need with the staff member changes. So that's kind of a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle, but we'll have a few special education positions we'll need to shore up. But otherwise, we had very few really staffing changes. This year we've had a few changes in administrators. Mr. Gans is moving on to Wilbur as their high school principal. Amber Lewis is moving up from Horizon Middle School to the high school. Bill Schmidt, her assistant, will be the new principal at Horizon. And then Mark Johnson retired, went to his retirement party yesterday. He's had a great run of 34 years and great teacher. Mark Johnson as a teacher was a Millikan Award winner, which is a national award. That's, to my knowledge, 3 people in Kearney Public Schools win that award as a teacher, over decades, and Mark's one of them. And he's going to go and teach at the university at UNK, so really proud of him. And Jason Sullivan is going to replace him. Jason was a principal at Loop City, Elm Creek. He's been in the areas in Cozad or Lexington. So he's going to do a great job, and we're excited to bring him on board.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Sorry, any other questions? I shouldn't cut off the questions if there's something else. Okay, Senator.
Thank you. As you can see on the panel, 2 of us are semi-retired, and 2 of them are still working hard. By the dress. Yeah, the legislature, we adjourned on April 17th. We had some bills that the governor vetoed, so we had to take care of those. Then we heard the farewell speeches of the senators who were term limited. Watching the elections last night was interesting. From the legislative perspective, there's a lot of interest obviously in the local, but the role that you're in the legislature, you're looking at what's going on across the state. We'll have 13 new senators, just simply those that have been term limited or have chosen not to come back or run for re-election. And then we have another 12 seats that that people are running for. And out of that 12 are senators that are seeking re-election. And we identified a few of them that might be a challenge, just some good competition, and that kind of played out last night. The thing about the elections, and Alex and I were talking about this, is the voter turnout. Midterms is generally a lower turnout. So when you look at the numbers, they're close, that can flip, that can change just simply by getting more voters out. But it was interesting, and there were some. We had local and county commissioners here. We had the new Secretary of State, because those are party driven, and so we'll have some new people in new positions. So just kind of watching the elections, and when I say there's 13 and 12, there was in my class 2 years ago, there were like 14, 15 new senators. So when you talk about the impact of turnout, that's what you're seeing. So we'll have on the ballot, I think this fall, I think we put it on there to go 3 terms, so that you get some of that continuity. I would tell you that this year, my second year, if you really think you know what it's doing, there was the YRTC bill in particular. I had to drop an amendment to look at statute to see how we could stop or hold on that. I've never done that before. In my second year, almost at the end of my second year. So I was checking with people, make sure I followed the right procedures, the right protocol, make sure I did it right. So, I'm halfway through my first term. So when you talk about experience and what that does, it's important, because you finally start feeling comfortable with things after maybe your second year, third year, on how the process works, what bills, how you go through that. And having said that, we had a 109th legislature. We had 700 some bills the first session, and then this last session we had another 500 and some bills. And initially I was like, how in the heck can we have that many bills? There's that much stuff going wrong in this state. Well, a lot of them are duplications. A lot of them are just frivolous bills that aren't going to see the light of day. Every session, both sessions, I've had a couple of dogs that just got handed to me. So that's going to happen. You're going to have bills that aren't getting out of committee. We ended up with over 1,200 bills, and we passed 300, 350, something like that. And then with those that we passed, there was also other bills that were apart, merged into those. So, there's a lot of work that goes into it. The short session, the 60-day session, I really thought that was a grind, because when you have 700 bills over 90 days, over 4 or 5 months, then you have another 500 bills plus the carryover bills in a shorter window. I tell you, you spend a lot of time in the 60-day session can be a drag. If you talk to other senators who have been in the body before, they would tell you the same thing. You're spending an inordinate amount of hours looking and reading and researching and talking and those types of things. So I was glad that the 60-day session was over. Now in the interim, what do you do in the interim? Probably a lot of you probably know this, but we have a lot of interim studies. First, and these are bills, or let's say resolutions that senators have dropped saying, hey, here's an issue, I want to do more research on this, I want to have a study. It very much operates like a committee hearing. So here's the topic. Sometimes you invite subject matter experts to come in, sometimes it's open to the public, and you just listen to the pros and cons. You may or may not get a bill generated from it. The center might think, well, this is a good idea, and then you have an interim study, and then that's not a good idea, or yeah, I think we need to take a bill and start moving forward because this makes some sense. So interim studies typically take place in the fall, either September, October, November timeframe. I have will be a part of 19 interim studies, and 5 of those were ones that I generated, and they're assigned to different committees depending on what committee or where they feel that committee ought to be doing that research. Out of that, 12 of them are in the urban affairs, of which I'm the vice chair of the urban affairs committee, and that's generally dealing with primarily things in Omaha and with Omaha predominantly. So there's going to be a lot of time spent on that. Then another thing that happens when you're on the interim is you have a lot of workshops and conferences that you go to. Those are not taxpayer funded. Now the legislature, we have in the budget that you can maybe get up to $1,200 to help with your expenses. But generally, You get scholarships if it's a workshop, and it's based a lot of times on maybe seniority or the committee you're in, because it ties to that committee. And so you have 2 or 3 of those throughout the summer. They can be scattered all across the United States, but that's where you network with other senators to find out what's going on in other states. And a lot of that comes out of your own pocket. When you talk about campaign funds on the war chest, it's not just for campaigning. A lot of times you can use that money to help pay for your travel expenses and things like that. So I've got a couple of those. One of them is the Energy Institute. I'm on the Natural Resources Committee. We've been talking about the energy situation across the country, and it's a big deal when you're talking about Nebraska, because Nebraska with our low energy rates has been really an attraction for data centers. And if you paid attention to that, but it's very controversial now. Data centers using all our energy, and it's going to affect our rates. And NPPD, that was my background. And so I'm going to go to these conferences. You also look at where we're going with nuclear. What's the infrastructure look like across the state, or the country, where are we at? So I've got a couple of those. One's in the state of Washington, which I'm pretty excited about going to Washington. That state. Then another part of that's in Washington, D.C. So we'll follow up on some of the legislative issues and those types of things. And so the interim is really, you have a lot of things, and you can pack as much into it as you want. The good thing about it is I'm in Kearney more than I'm in Lincoln, and I appreciate that, but I still have staff in Lincoln, and I'm there at least 1 or 2 days every week or every other week. And we've already started looking at bills that we want to introduce. We've already started looking at, okay, here's the questions we have on this interim subject. Who's the subject matter experts? I want more detail, more data, and that's what your staff does for you. They do all that research for you. And so you say, here's an area that I want to target. What's this look like? Give me more information. So I already have in mind some bills that I want to introduce. I already asked my staff, okay, meet with bill drafting. Let's get this thing drafted so we're not pushing right at the end. So I was told we're not even drafting bills yet. I had all my interim study bills or resolutions laid out, what committee they're going to be in, which committees I'm on, what we're going to see. So I asked my staff follow up with the committees, their chairs, find out when their schedules are, what we need to be doing. Staff reported back to me. They're taking a break. They're not even doing that yet. So my idea of being organized and ahead of the game doesn't necessarily fit with how it works. So I'll just have to have a little patience, maybe go golfing sooner or later. Some of those types of things later on. Some of the things that we saw, and this is where the political side, even though it's a unicameral, it's partisan. There's no question, and anybody that's Washington knows it is partisan. And the big thing that I see a lot of senators that struggle under re-election is turning back the will of the voters. You going against the will of the voters. That's the tagline. You went against the will of the voters. Well, as you sit there and talk about it, when you have a ballot initiative, you have 1 page. And it's very condensed is what you're voting on. When it gets down to the legislature, we have to look at it. We can have 14, 16 hours of debate and multiple pages of the details. And so as you start looking at some of those ballot initiatives, then there's a lot more to this than, For example, the minimum wage, that was a big deal. And when you talk to small businesses, that minimum wage, it's hurting. It hurts small businesses. Does it create jobs? Actually, data will show you that it hurts jobs. Because if your price gets too high, then you're going to find a way to automate it. Kiosks, and now you got the robots to take your food out to you. So they're going to find, in order to stay in business owners got to find creative ways of doing it. I've talked to many local businesses here in Kearney. One of them said once the minimum wage went into effect, I had to give everybody else raises because why are you hiring them and I've been working for you? And so now it all goes up. So what does that do? Now when you go out to eat, it's going to cost you more money. So, it's challenging. So when you look at it on the ballot and it's a statute. What statute means is you put it in statute, but then like any other law or anything in statute, the legislature can tweak it. We can take a look at it, we can massage it, we can do what we want to. If you don't want the legislature to touch it, then it becomes a constitutional amendment. And you put it on the ballot as a constitutional amendment, then it's in the Constitution, the legislature can't touch it. The only way that that can get corrected is through another constitutional amendment to adjust it. The trade-off there is it takes a lot more ballot signatures to make a constitutional amendment, and rightfully so, because you're changing your Nebraska state constitution. So when you turn back the will of the voters, a lot of times it gets down there and we have to look at how does this fit, how does this apply, what's the impact, and so we tweak a lot of that. And that's where the political argument comes in. Well, you turn it back, no, we're trying to make it so that it's more workable for everybody. And case in point, if you had enough people and they said, we want everybody to get a $20,000 benefit, paycheck, or check every year from the state of Nebraska, and put it on the ballot, you think that would pass? Sure, there'd be a lot of people like, yeah, I'll take $20,000 a year, where do I sign? Well, where's it coming from? Who's paying for it? What's the impact? All that. That's never addressed on the ballot initiative. If it costs you your job and you're making $50,000, $60,000 a year, you want $20,000 a year and risk losing that. Those are all those issues that go into it. But that's what we're dealing with. And you just have to make sure that you're talking to your constituents, you understand what's going on, and just make sure that people have a good understanding of where you're at, if they want to. If they don't, I mean, you can't force anything on anybody. But those are the things that we deal with from the legislature, and where we're at this point in time in the legislature, watching some of the colleagues where they're at, some of the new ones. They went through the primary with landslides. We had some of them that were unopposed. Senator Iboff from here, she was unopposed. So there's several senators who are unopposed. That's always the best thing when you're unopposed, because then you don't have to go through all this and spend all this money. The amount of money they're spending in Omaha and Lincoln on these elections, it's crazy. 2 years ago when I ran, some of the numbers that they were spending in Omaha to get elected was $250,000 on some of these senators. The minimum $250,000 just to get elected to the legislature that pays $12,000. So some of that stuff just doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's just where we're at these days, and it's what it takes. So I'll open up any questions.
Stan, what's the one or two most consequential bills that were passed this year from a positive or negative, in your opinion,
Well,
that we wouldn't even know about probably?
there's, gosh, I should have brought my whole list. The ones that took a lot of the time are generally the social issues. And it's more than social. The medical marijuana, that's still huge. We put money into for the commission so that they could function. That was never a part of the ballot. I mean, they said, we need to have this commission. Well, how do you fund it? So we had to allocate dollars to that commission and get them some salaries, because these are, you got to pay people on these commissions. So we had to allocate dollars for that. Then there was one of the bills that came in that would allow Nebraska doctors, if they wanted to recommend medical marijuana, that they could do that and be having immunity from prosecution. Okay, so that one took a lot of debate, and at the end of the day, we were getting ready to vote on it. Then Senator Kathleen Kacc introduced the bill on transgenders in bathrooms, because it opened up a section of the statute that opened that one up. So she put that on there. Well, that bill was just done. I supported the immunity simply because most of the doctors that I know, they want to do what's right for their patient. If they've tried all the conventional stuff, they might say, okay, we can try this. I'm not going to guarantee, if you're fighting cancer and it's just not working, that's my perspective, is you're not going to have doctors running rampant writing recommendations. That's not going to work. But then we never got there. So that's one of them. Well, you turn back to the other people, they want medical marijuana. Why is this taking so long? Well, it's a process. You gotta get growers, they're working through it. Are we dragging our feet a little bit? Maybe, but you wanna make sure you do it right. So I don't think anybody wants recreational marijuana in the state. And so put the right protocols. So medical marijuana is always a big deal. We had one on child care subsidies. When it was in COVID, to be eligible for SNAP benefits and child care, it was 135% of poverty. They had poverty level prior to COVID. When COVID impacted, a lot of people weren't working, so they bumped it up to 185% with a 5-year, deadline. It would cease to be. So now we're dealing with those issues. We want to keep it 185%. Like, how are we paying for this? So the budget is always, right now, the biggest thing. When you look at what we've done for income tax and reducing your income tax, that's a big deal. When you reduce your income tax, the state income tax, your revenue drops significantly, because that's a big revenue stream for the state of Nebraska. So when you drop that revenue, and now we're going to add in the school tax credits or the property relief tax credits that you get. Most people don't pay attention to it, but it's about 20% of your property tax bill. If you look at your tax statement, I looked at mine, it's like I got a tax credit from the state, about 20%. So when your revenue goes like this and your expenses go like this, how do you balance that? The big ticket items were the Perkins County Canal, which that's important because that's a big battle with Colorado. Go look at the river. They think water is important. That's a big deal. Building prisons, that's another one. So people argue those are two big ticket items. We need to get rid of those. Same way with the income tax. We still had another step down. And so I would support on the step down to break it down another 0.5%, half of what it was, because it still generates several hundred million. But it wasn't enough when we were looking at 500, 600, 700 million deficit. So we didn't do that. So we were looking at fee structures. So anytime that you raised a fee, then that was a red light, and that was just debate. You're hurting the people. Some of these fees haven't been adjusted for 20, 30 years. Why? Because we had money, so they didn't need to. Well, now when it's getting tight, you start looking, well, what are the actual costs of operating this division or this department? So some of them we had to raise some fees. So now it comes back to, well, you're hurting the people that can least afford it. You're doing, it's like, maybe we gotta get these fee structures right and get our revenue where it needs to be so that we can see where we're at. Because we know we're losing revenue. How do we generate revenue? All you're gonna do is you're gonna increase revenue through these fees, and then the government gonna come swipe it out of fund balances.
Well, one of the problems I see, Stan, is that if you're gonna make a big state income tax rebate back to the citizens, then you need to also look at raising sales tax by 0.25% or 0.5% to offset that. When you do a sales tax, that revenue is coming from people that are coming through our state too. It's not just the citizens of Nebraska. So you're gaining from that point and to offset that income and revenue stream. So
we see that.
I think it's short-sighted it's been short-sighted from the Republican standpoint. And I'm a Republican, but when I was running for the legislature, Pete Ricketts, it was like, we're not raising taxes anywhere, if not across the board. And I tried to indicate to him that there were opportunities to raise tax in one area and offset it and reduce taxes in others. And he just wouldn't listen to that kind of deal. And we're kind of running through the same thing right now.
And back then, you still had the income tax level at higher levels. It was after he was out where they started dropping it. So I think there's going to be more, people are going to be more receptive to that. In fact, one of the bills in Kacc County is I'm against the inheritance tax, and that brings the county about 1.2 million. But one of the bills I plan to introduce is to allow counties to increase or have a countywide sales tax with the vote of the people, and whatever that generates, offset property taxes. And that's what we've done in the city for years. We live on sales tax. You know that, I know that. Most people in the city know that. And so we have to make that shift. And I agree, have to make that shift from property tax to sales tax, and it's always a question of how much and how fast. And a couple of years ago, with the uptick tax, there were going to be that consumption tax, and get rid of all taxes, and then your taxes, sales tax might go up 15-20%. You know, that was the problem there. So there are multiple facets on how you deal with the property tax. Unfunded mandates to the counties. I've looked at the manual on that, how many unfunded mandates are in the county. We killed a bunch of those this last session, but it doesn't amount to millions, but every little bit helps. So I agree, we've got to get some of that to the sales tax and then the exemptions. Oh my God, you look at the number of sales tax exemptions in this state, it's crazy.
Is it 178 or something like that?
Try taking an exemption away and see what happens in the legislature. You know, try adding the sales tax, see what happens in the legislature. Try increasing fees, see what happens in the legislature. You know, those are things you just sit there and you're like, okay, well, give me a better idea. So that's the challenge that we have on the budget right now. And we had it balanced, then the forecast committee comes in and says, yeah, well, we're gonna be a deficit more. And so I don't know how much more we can rob from some of these funds, but then you got the environmental trust, you've got the arts, and those things. And some of those are questionable legally. Can we do that? And I think we're going to see some things there that the school lands in particular. That's foundation dollars and environmental trust. Yeah, you maybe get there, but what I've told those people, use the money. Don't sit there and build up millions when you could be giving grants. You could be putting the money to use of the intended purpose. So do that. Which is kind of counterintuitive too, because you think you're just telling people to spend money. No, there's projects out there that if you do the projects, especially environmental trust, if it helps the environment, helps with water sustainability, all that stuff, put it to work, use it.
I have a good friend of mine, his sister lives in Missouri, and a data center had moved into her location, and her electric bill went up to almost like $500 a month. And she had to move because she couldn't afford it. What's the likelihood of that now that we see this AI boom? We see this kind of like a arms race between the big five dogs, right? I'm seeing like just to test some of these specific like locations, they put it up to millions of dollars for electrical facilities, and especially here in Nebraska, we don't have a lot of water, and they need a lot of water to cool it. You know, so what's your idea here?
Yeah, we had a bill, very controversial, and Grant can talk about that a little bit too, but we have in our policy, in our retail division, it's called a simultaneous buy-sell. And it gets pretty complex, but basically, you want to generate it, well, you can't sell it as, if the public schools had a big generator, they couldn't sell it to you, because then they become, not a school system, they become a utility. So what you have to do is you have to sell it to utility, and the utility will sell it to the customer. Okay, following so far? So what happens is, we're not gonna give you the wholesale rate, because why would I do that? We'll pay you what the retail rate is. You can't afford to do it at the retail rate. So at the lower level, that doesn't work. So what happened, we had a bill that for a data center, and they were talking about 1,000 megawatts, I think it was. 1,000 megawatts is a lot. You know, we talked about Kearney being 100, Lincoln maybe 800 megawatts for the city. So that's a lot of power. So the bill that was introduced was if you have a data center and somebody then wants to build a generation, sell it to MPPD or Norris Power or whomever, then they can turn and sell it to the data center. Okay. So then you're like, well, that's a simultaneous buy-sell. It doesn't really work on the retail, so how is this going to work on the wholesale? So then I thought that through, and I thought, well, it depends on who it is, who's putting that generation in. And the biggest cost for generation, Derek, you can weigh in on this too, is fuel costs. Nuclear, coal, that's your largest cost to the generation. So if you have somebody that comes in, they're going to build it, where are they getting it? So immediately you got to think, well, here's Tenasca that wants to build this. What's Tenasca? Wholesale gas. Well, they have the cheapest fuel costs So they can make it up on the fuel costs and lose it on the, you know, it's kind of a lost leader. So they don't care what they sell it for, they're gonna make it on gas sales. So it's gotta be the right customer in the right location. And what we talked about in the body when this debate was going on, it went on for a long, long time, very divisive, was that in economic development, there are multiple factors that go into siting a data center. You know, power is just one component. It's a big component, but it's one component. You have water, you have land, you have zoning, you have all these other things that go into it. What's the labor force? What's, you know, so many things that go into it, but we got locked in on the electrical side of it. And so if they're doing a simultaneous buy sell, shouldn't impact it. Shouldn't impact your rates. Now, will they do that everywhere? No, but that big load like that, shouldn't impact it. That was the purpose of that bill, was to protect the ratepayers and public power from those types of things.
So it partitions them off from the public.
So they can build their plant, they can generate it, you know, we don't care what they buy their fuel for, they do. But here's what we're gonna pay you as a utility, and then we'll turn around and just pass it through to the data center at whatever price that is.
Have you seen any bills come through the legislature for AI, for, you know, like, I don't know, just curious.
We have a lot of discussion, not so much on AI, but social media and the impact of it. We have several bills over the last couple of years on how do you regulate that and how do you protect the kids from the impact of social media. And there's a lot of things that we, you know, little things like putting your cell phone in the locker. So I talked to the superintendents, hey, is this a big deal to you? No, we already did. I'm like, okay. Not all every districts were doing it. They were letting the kids take their cell phones in. And so a lot of things that are done that are, I'll say the best of the best, because I support where we're at. They're doing those things already, but there's issues with AI. We talk a lot about that on what are we seeing for policy that's generated, what are we doing for bills, the data that we're getting, where's that coming from? Is that AI generated, or basically doing fact checks on a lot of things when we're looking at legislation?
Oh, man.
So it's a big deal, but that's why data centers are important, because that's the world we live in. So if you don't want AI, you don't want everything in here, you know, it's kind of like when we were talking about renewable energies a long time ago in PPD. It's like, well, if you like renewable, then you better like power lines, because it takes power lines to get it to where the work is. And so if you don't like data centers, then give up some of the stuff that requires data centers. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Sorry, Stan, we have time for about one more question, and then we're probably gonna have to wrap up.
I have a question, but it doesn't relate to that, but it's, when you're gonna have your staffing, you got 1,200 bills you're trying to go through in a year. Does your staff kind of cull those for you or give you cliff notes on some of the bills so you can eliminate the ones that are not as important or not even viable?
When you see what's going on the floor, and every senator does a little bit different. I've seen senators walk in and then their staff carries all the paperwork behind them, and I'm like, nah, I'm not doing that. I mean, nah. I don't look at bills until they make it out of committee. Until the committees I'm on, I look and read every one of them. And when they're on the floor, when I see what's on the agenda on the floor, I go through a lot of paper because I print them because I want to highlight it. I got questions. And when you see senators walking around, generally I'm going over and talking to another senator. What's this mean? How does this impact you guys? How does this, if it's an educational bill, I'll go down to Senator Lanowski and say, is this good? Because he was a school teacher forever. And I said, is this good? Does this make sense? Because they said, here's what I'm hearing. Does it match up? So you read a lot of bills. I spend so much time reading bills and reading additional data that comes along. But that's just how I do it. And I don't have my staff do that for me. You know, I might tell them, here's the bills for tomorrow, give me copies, just lay them on my table, I'll pick them up when I walk up on the floor. And you're always on the computer looking at new things. So each senator does a little different. I'm more of a control freak. I want to do it myself so I know what's going on. And because I'm the one that's got to hit the button, it's not a staffer, it's not, you know. So that's pretty much how it works. Each center is a little different. First year I was down there, I'd walk into some of these centers, they had these big old whiteboards and they had all this stuff on there, and I'm like, what are you doing? It's like, that's craziness. This year I had a whiteboard with all that stuff. I'm track of where they're, because it's your bill. Last 2 years, I had over 23 bills. And I think I've had 11 of them that got passed, 4 or 5 of them. I knew it's going to be held in committee, so it wasn't that big a deal. I knew that they were challenging. And like I said, I had 2 or 3 dogs, so I got it handed to me. And so percentage-wise, it's not bad to have, 40, 50%, because generally it's a lot lower than that. So, but I don't go for the real controversial stuff. I want to do this stuff that it's not. What makes a difference? Does this make our life better with this bill? Does this help the county? Does this help the schools? I don't care about this. I shouldn't say I don't care. It's not important to me to worry about the bathrooms and some of these other things. It's important, yeah. I'd rather do something to reduce unfunded mandates, to what are we doing to protect the kids in schools. Those are more important to me, and that's generally where my focus is at on the bills that I've introduced.
Well, thank you guys for coming to speak to us today, and thank you everyone for attending. Again, this is sponsored by Northwestern Energy, and we hope you join us next month. Thank you.